In this video, we're going to discuss some disadvantages of flexible budgeting. So flexible budgeting is an incredibly useful tool that's going to allow us to compare a company's actual operating results to the results that should have occurred given the actual activity level. Remember, we can't just compare a company's actual operating results to the amounts that were planned in the budget from the beginning of the period, because when we made our planning budget, we were assuming a certain activity level. Okay, in this example, it's a company that does consulting projects, and we're assuming 100 projects, but we in fact had 130 projects. So we go and we make adjustments to the figures in the planning budget to get our flexible budget. Our flexible budget is the amounts that should have been predicted to occur if we had assumed instead there had been 130 projects. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and that's the value that we're adding, is now we can compare the flexible budget to the actual results. Really, a flexible budget is just an adjusted budget to the activity level. But the key assumption here is that we can somehow measure what these figures should be. Okay, think about it like this. Think about wages. Okay, so I've got all the formulas here that I use to actually calculate this flexible budget and also to calculate the planning budget. These are the formulas. Think about wages. So wages, we could think about having a fixed and a variable component. Okay, if you have a consulting firm or any kind of firm and you don't have any clients for a week, you're not going to fire the entire staff, right? You're not just going to fire people and say, well, we'll call you back when we get a client. Okay, so there is some fixed component of wages. You have to have some staff, you have to have some employee or somebody working at the company, right? The company can't just be an empty shell. But there's also a variable component that as you take on a lot more clients, you hire more people, you're going to have more wages, or your existing workers will work longer hours and so forth. So there's a fixed and there's a variable component of wages. So we could say that wages could be seen as a mixed cost where there's a fixed and variable component. The issue is that it's not that easy to calculate and predict what these mixed costs are going to be, right? All these costs here that we've got in our flexible budget, these are predictions. These are predictions, and when it's a fixed cost, like if we're talking about rent, that's pretty easy. We say, well, rent, it's just fixed. It's going to be $18,000 regardless of what the activity level is. It's $18,000. But the wages are different. The wages are different. And so anytime there's some kind of a mixed cost, we have to come up with a formula. We have to come up with a formula and say, what is the fixed cost component? What is the variable cost component? And so we use that to predict what the total cost would be under various scenarios, in this case for 130 consulting projects. Not easy to do, very time consuming. Okay, and so to the extent that these numbers aren't going to be that accurate because our formulas aren't that great, that could lead to some issues when we're comparing our actual results to the amounts from the flexible budget. Another issue is, let's say the company has a cost structure that is mostly consisted of fixed costs. So if the company is just heavily has fixed costs, so here we've got a lot of variable costs. We've got variable costs of supplies and utilities and all that. But let's ignore all these variable costs, and let's just say that this company is almost exclusively fixed costs. When you have almost exclusively fixed costs, so let's take a look again. So our insurance. So let's assume that so we had that this is a fixed cost in this example. So it's $2,400 in the planning budget, $2,400 in the flexible budget. There's no change because the nature of a fixed cost is that it's no different no matter what the activity level is. So if I tell you, oh, well, look, we expected activity level of 100 and we in fact had 130. Let's make adjustments to go to what the budget should have been if it was 130. It doesn't matter, because if all the costs are fixed, then it doesn't matter whether there was 130 consulting projects or 100 or whatever. So in that case, basically all these costs are going to be the same because they're fixed. They don't vary with the activity level. So for a company that has a cost structure that consists of most or all fixed costs, then it's really no point in really coming up with a flexible budget because it just might not be worth the time and the effort to do so.